We'll now recognize members for questions. We'll begin with my favorite portrait from the South Wall, Mr. Frank Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member, for holding this hearing, and the witnesses for agreeing to testify. The CFTC regulates markets that impact nearly every part of the economy, and reauthorizing the Commission will give us an opportunity to provide meaningful oversight and give certainty to market participants. The derivatives market faces a number of potential stresses: the Basel Endgame, the GSIP surcharge, the Treasury market structure reform, along with substantial SEC rulemaking agenda that will decrease market liquidity and increase costs. In the context of CFTC reauthorization, it's worth considering the full regulatory environment that the markets are confronted with. So there's a lot to discuss. Starting with the Basel proposal, an issue I've discussed with Chairman Benham, Secretary Yellen, Chairman Powell, and all of the prudential regulators, is the impact this will have on our capital markets, including reduced access to derivative products for end users and further concentrations of FCMs. It seems like the regulators would be open to a reproposal, but FDIC and OCC will have to join with the Fed on that decision. Mr. Lucan, you're no stranger to the Ag Committee room, so thank you for joining us today and touching on Basel during your testimony. Could you expand on why it's so important that the regulators reopen the proposal for public comment?
Well, Congressman Lucas, you have been a leader on this topic on capital, and this committee has been a leader to point out the obvious fact from the financial crisis, which that our markets and clearing and central counterparties actually mitigate risk. They reduce risk in the financial system. And so the capital is an important component of the financial reforms coming out of the financial crisis, that banks should hold more capital for risky activity. But they just have it wrong. I think the prudential regulators are overtaxing clearing activity to make it so that there's going to be a capacity issue, that banks are going to stop offering this service to hedgers. We heard Travis talk about this, that end users may have limited access to hedging vehicles to hedge volatility in commodity markets as a result of Basel capital. So our hope is that the prudential regulators are listening to the reasonable voices of CFTC Benham and others that have said, you have to get this right. It has to be proportional to the risk brought by our markets, and we're hopeful that that gets fixed in the coming months.
Mr. Sexton, you're a member of the CFTC's Global Markets Advisory Committee. One suggestion among many that GMAC had for the Commission last month was to hold a roundtable with the bank regulators focused on derivatives issues impacted by Basel. Could you explain broadly to the importance of stakeholder feedback on matters that will have a significant impact on the market?
Thank you for the question, Congressman Lucas. I certainly endorse the concept of GMAC and its recommendation to hold this roundtable to further determine the impact of these capital rules. As Mr. Luca and Travis have indicated, this is extremely important to farmers and ranchers and end users and hedgers because of the consolidation that may occur among firms if these capital rules are put in place. So stakeholder impact comments are extremely important and something that we should be looking to do.
The CFTC's enforcement authority has been a closely watched issue during the past several years. Reauthorizing the CFTC gives us the opportunity to closely examine what the Commission is doing and identifying improvements that can be made. Mr. Lucan, back to you. Do you think the Commission's current cross-border authority is effective from a regulatory and enforcement perspective?
Well, I can only speak from my experience at the CFTC, but we were able to work closely with our regulatory authorities overseas to partner with them to make sure that they had the appropriate information. But the important thing is, does the CFTC have direct authority when there is a strong nexus to the United States? And I believe they do, that they have the ability to go after bad behavior overseas when it's a strong nexus to the United States. So I think the CFTC does have appropriate authority.
Mr. Chairman, before I yield back, I'd simply note that I have spent much time screaming about the potential impacts of the Basel capital requirements on the American economy. This is one of those things that if we don't get it right, the damage that would be inflicted will be extremely difficult to address later. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.